There we go, Chair, make that 2 o'clock.
Thank you very much. If I can call us to order, it's 2 o'clock. So, can I just check the recording okay? Okay, so welcome to all members and officers to this hybrid meeting of the Cross-Cutting Resources and Business Overview and Scrutiny Committee. That's a nice succinct title, isn't it? This meeting is able to be viewed live by members of the public today. Therefore, may I welcome anyone that may be watching online at present. A recording of this meeting will be made available on the Council's webcasting and YouTube channels after the meeting has concluded, should anyone else wish to view it. To confirm, as a Council, we welcome the use of the Welsh language within our public meetings, but I can confirm that I have not received any notification or request to use Welsh today. Therefore, the meeting will be conducted in English only. May I remind members to refrain from using the chat facility and instead use the raised hand icon to indicate when you wish to speak. Please could you also keep your microphone muted when not speaking so there aren't any interruptions encountered. Perhaps I could also remind members that our statutory guidance made under Section 4 of the Local Government Wales Measure 2011 and our formally adopted hybrid meeting policy, any member attending a meeting remotely must be able to be seen and heard by the members and officers who are attending this meeting, as well as by members of the public viewing the meeting. So can I ask that you all please have your cameras on for the duration of the meeting? Thank you. So moving on to the agenda, we'll start with checking in terms of any apologies. Niall?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So we've had apologies from Councillors Liam Cowles, Giles Davis, Elizabeth Haynes, Caroline Price and Alan Slade.
Thank you very much. So we'll record that. Item 2 then is the declarations of interest. So can I ask if any members have got anything they wish to declare? Or essentially, I think as we often done, if you find you come across a declaration need through the course of the meeting, please speak. That'd be great. Item 3, the confirmation of minutes of the meeting held on the 16th of April 2024, so that was a little while ago. Can I ask people if they're happy to approve those as an accurate record? Yep, I'm seeing hands go up. Yeah, I think that's pretty much unanimous. So thank you very much, colleagues. Which moves us on to item 4, the action sheet. So it's just to confirm if members have any questions on the actions or whether they want to, or if they're just happy to note the action sheet. All happy to note? Yep, I'm seeing hands again. So thank you, colleagues. I think that covers the previous meeting items. So we move on to the main substantive item, which is item 5, which is the Climate and Nature Emergency Annual Performance Report. So we're going to discuss the work that's been done on this in relation to the delivery plan. So first of all, I'd like to welcome the officers and the executive member for Waste and Sustainability. Perhaps before I ask Councillor Morgan to introduce the report, it might be helpful if officers can indicate who's here for those members who are online. So could I ask, starting with Gren?
Yeah, Gren Vorham, I'm the Energy and Carbon Reduction Manager.
Rachel Ajorzi, Environmental and Sustainability Manager.
That's Steve Williams, Ecology and Local Nature Partnerships Manager.
Mark Thomas, responsibility for highways, transport and climate change.
Andrew Lovegrove, as Director of Resources.
Dan Morelli, Head of Public Protection and Environment.
Thank you very much, officers. So if I can pass now to Councillor Sue Morgan, the Executive Member, to introduce the report and give us a very quick summary to start us off.
Thank you, Chair. I'm really pleased to introduce this session on the work that members have been leading and officers have been carrying out across the Council in relation to the climate and nature emergency during the last year of 23-24. As you all know, councils have a duty to improve long-term well-being through the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, and we can't do so unless we work together to respond to the climate and nature emergencies. Today you'll have the opportunity to consider the progress we've made over the past year towards our objectives in this, the second year of delivery. For us as a council, the journey to net zero will involve decarbonising our vehicles and how we travel. It will involve changing how we heat and power our buildings and reducing the carbon impact of the goods and the services that we buy. And beyond our own emissions, we also have a role to play in supporting and encouraging our communities towards net zero, as key sources of emissions in the borough come from homes, transport and businesses. Sadly, the world is already seeing the impact of climate change and biodiversity loss, and this needs to be factored into the way we plan. Taking action to prepare for a changing climate will contribute to future well-being, and ensuring our natural assets are well managed and in good condition will mean that future generations can experience their well-being benefits. Well, we know we can't do everything all at once, and the performance report that we'll consider today sets out our progress over the past year, with many of the actions we're taking now laying the foundations for future activity, and of course we're all learning as we go. Going forward, some of the challenges we will need to face will be very challenging indeed, and the changes we need to make won't always be comfortable. But we realise they're important to ensure the long-term resilience of our services and, most importantly, to ensure the benefits to the communities that we serve. I'll now hand you over to Mark Thomas, Deputy Director, Highways and Climate Change, who will briefly talk you through the report. And may I just say that we, as always, thoroughly welcome your input into this most important topic and look forward to receiving your views.
Thank you. The performance report sets out our progress across the second year of delivery of the Council's Climate and Nature Emergency Plan, which stretches from 2022 to 2027. And this particular report covers the progress from April 2023 to March 2024. So just to let you know, we've moved on from this and are progressing well, on the reaching our targets for this current financial year as well. The report focuses on the delivery of the plan's 4 main work streams and actions undertaken under each of those, and you'll see within the report as we go forward, we try to list actions and issues under each of those 4 work streams. Just to remind you, the 4 work streams are: number 1, the Council will become net carbon zero by 2030. The second one is the Council leads, supports and facilitates and encourages Torfaen's communities, residents and businesses towards net zero carbon by 2050. The third one is our changing climate is factored into the way we plan, so that our communities and the services we deliver are resilient. And the fourth one is Torfaen's precious natural resources and the biodiversity they support are protected and enhanced. You will note the report is split into section 1, which provides a summary of the key performance indicators and an overview of activities undertaken during that year, while section 2 provides a more detailed update on all the actions we said we would deliver during that year. You'll note as well that on pages 6 and 7, the report includes a carbon emissions summary, which is helpful, I hope, for members. The data shows that the Council has continued to make progress towards the net zero target. Of the emissions that the Council directly controls, you'll see that building emissions have reduced by just under 40%. Street lighting emissions have reduced by 28.5%. And our estimated fleet and equipment emissions have reduced by just over 50%. So there's good progress being made. We have challenges as well in terms of some of those areas that we don't have direct control over, supply chain being one of them, but we're making good progress with colleagues in procurement as well to assess what actions can be done to address that and influence that supply chain. A summary of other key performance indicators can be found on pages 8 to 9. These include information about the number of trees planted, the provision of electric vehicle charging sockets for fleet, staff and visitors at council sites, and the renewable energy generated by the council. There are 107 actions in the 23-24 delivery plan, compared to just 66 actions in the 22-23 delivery plan. This illustrates the increased awareness of climate and nature emergency considerations across the organisation. External funding has enabled some of our additional actions, and as our increased knowledge and understanding of how to effectively respond, and that's developing as we go. As the executive member stated, this is an iterative process, and we are developing as the years progress. Of the 107 actions, 37 actions have been completed, and they're indicated in blue. 41 actions are green, 23 actions are amber, and 3 are red. So of those, 73% of the actions in the delivery plan are either on target or have been completed. So these include installing more solar photovoltaic installations on school buildings, increasing electric vehicle charging provision on council sites, holding Torvine's first annual food summit, adopting supplementary planning guidance on biodiversity, and increasing the area of council-owned grassland managed for biodiversity. 21% of the actions were amber. This means there have been delays, including the production of our net zero fleet strategy, work to complete upgrades to the Point Newman station, and plans to recycle waste electrical and electronic equipment at the curbside. But just to give members some confidence, we're making good progress within this current financial year. 3% of the actions were identified as having more significant delays. So whilst we're applying RAD status to the plan showing direction of travel, some actions are more complex, as the executive member has already explained, than others, being made up of many steps and require multiple years to fully deliver. Section 4.7 of the report covers, obviously, delivery successes during 23-24, and they're split under the 4 work streams, as I explained before. However, under section 4.8, good progress has been made against key actions. These are parts of the plans where officers have identified the need to build capacity and accelerate progress. So we recognise there's work to be done, and these actions are listed under each work stream again under 4.8. Jumping on to section 6, obviously, of implications. You'll see under 6.1 we've covered some financial implications, again split up into the work streams. Of particular interest, I think, is Torvine's draft local area energy plan. We will need to assess resource implications as the plan matures, actions develop, existing scopes widen, and regional, national initiatives are brought forward. So it's clear here that the Council alone is unable to deliver these aspirations in isolation, so partnership working is key. And we're working closely with Cardiff Capital Region as we progress along those issues. Suggested scrutiny activity. The Cross-Cutting Resources and Business Overview and Scrutiny Committee is invited to review the performance report for 23-24, the Climate and Nature Emergency Delivery Plan, as set out in Appendix 1, and assess whether the Council has delivered on the climate and nature emergency objectives with sufficient progress, determine whether the areas that have been identified for building capacity and accelerating progress will be effective in delivering the climate and nature emergency objectives, and provide comments and recommendations to the relevant executive member directors on areas for improvement or the need of greater focus. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. I should perhaps advise colleagues as well that we do have a couple of other officers online, so I don't know if you'd like to quickly say who you are. I know there's Andrew and a gentleman from procurement. So.
Thank you, Chair. Andrew Osborne, Group Leader Environment.
I'm John Paxton. I'm from Cardiff Council's Commissioning and Procurement Team that provides support to the Ardell Councils on the delivery of the carbon reduction agenda.
Thank you very much, colleagues. Right, I'll open it up to... Oh, sorry. Sorry, another one as well. Thank you. Gemma?
Yes, hi, I'm Gemma Ellis. I'm currently the Interim Head of Procurement here at Ardell, working with John.
Thank you very much. So we've got quite a lot of people available to answer any questions and things. So I suggest, colleagues, we start with if there are any questions on the body of the report itself that anybody would like to raise, come back to. Councillor Evans?
Yeah, looking at the report on item 4.61, on the second paragraph it says out of 107 actions, but if you add them all up, that's only 104. There's 3 not being looked at. Is there any particular reason for that? My second question is, we're doing all this. Is it achievable to do net zero by 2030 for the council? You know, the thing is, everybody's saying they could do it, but with a short period of time left, are we going to make it? That's the point I'm trying to raise.
Okay, I think that's a fair point. So who'd like to pick this one up?
I'll take the first one about the actions. So if there's an error in the arithmetic, I apologise for that. So that will be a typo. So I'll submit corrected details after the meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to attempt to answer the net zero 2030. I think we're all aware acutely that it's a very ambitious target. And there's a number of ways to answer this. The complexity of net zero 2030 is that there's a certain amount of it that is under our control. We control how much energy we use and the type of energy we use to heat our buildings, same with our vehicles and our fleet. What we don't control is the carbon emissions of businesses that we use through procurement. Now, looking at the data, around about 70% of all of our carbon emissions are the responsibility of our contractors. I'm of the mindset that technically they are under the envelope of net zero by 2050, which is when wider society needs to reach net zero. On a similar note, okay, so there's areas that are partially under our control, which would be things like the way our staff commute to school. And we can encourage them for more sustainable modes of transport. We can encourage them by flexible home working to reduce those carbon emissions. But it's not within our remit to dictate to our staff what type of vehicle you use to commute, you know, or how you purchase it. And there will always be familial issues at hand, or maybe they've inherited a vehicle and it's the only affordable way to do it. And particularly, we have to be mindful that some of the most sustainable mechanisms of transport are new and therefore expensive. So we try to frame our carbon reporting annually within these are the areas that we do control. We have the financial levers to influence them. Even taking that all into account, it will be expensive and a Herculean effort because we're talking about investing in aged infrastructure to bring it up to the modern age with new technologies. There's a number of other elements here, though, beyond just the council, that we're increasingly trying to relay back to Welsh Government and to our partners and other authorities. So part of it being net zero is that it's not just the emissions that we release, it's also the mechanisms we do to net that off. And there's 2 direct mechanisms there. One is our land holdings and the ability for them to absorb carbon. We call that sequestration. At the moment, that is not netted off against our carbon emissions, but we know how much that is, and we are working with partners and looking to develop a mechanism to report ours more comprehensively so that we can deduct it via the greenhouse gas emissions framework, if that makes sense. At the moment, we're not allowed to subtract it because it's not been analysed to the extent that the global protocols dictate. The other element that could be netted off would be from exporting our electricity. So a lot of our sites, particularly our schools, they have photovoltaic cells. During the term time, they do well. They may be reducing the electricity use by 20%, 30%. But in the summer holidays, when they produce the most, they're exporting to the grid. Under the current reporting framework, we're not allowed to net that off. So we're making representation to say we would like that to do. I think both of those taken into account would probably only result in around about 30% of our emissions that we control being netted off, but it's a significant part of that. But beyond that, we're also looking at the Welsh public sector as a whole. So there are entities such as Natural Resource Wales, which have very significant carbon sequestration land holdings, and trying to tease out whether or not there's a model in which some of those sequestration numbers can be netted off on a proportionate basis across the public authorities in Wales. It would be, in my view, and I think it's probably a pretty logical view, it would make much more sense by 2030 if those carbon sequestrations are apportioned across the nation rather than only NRW being minus 50,000 tonnes and everybody else is failing. So there's a number of mechanisms there, but the simple answer to your question is it will be exceedingly challenging just to get to zero on the emissions we control ourselves, and we don't necessarily have the levers to dictate to our partners who we procure with to drive their emissions down fully at the same rate and scale that we are.
Okay, that was quite a full response. Councillor Evans, are you happy with that? Anything you want to check on?
Yeah, I am. Just a little follow-up to that, if I could. We mentioned electrical charging points, particularly for vehicles, but does that incorporate electric bikes or trikes or anything else? Because unless I've missed it in the report, it's usually the bigger vehicles. So if we're trying to bring our carbon footprint down, then surely people who ride electric bikes would be beneficial as they turn up to work with that and have somewhere reasonable to charge it.
You raise a very good point. My understanding is the voltage of the EV charger, electric vehicle, the four-wheeled vehicles, let's say, chargers, is probably too high for what we consider normal bikes. It would be applicable for some e-motorbikes. Most electric bikes charge via the traditional 240-volt plugs internally. Now, it should be something we would look at for bike storage, is implementing those sort of charging facilities. I'm not aware that we've done it yet, but it is something that we're aware needs to be done in future, because, again, the use of electric bicycles could be a determining factor in someone having a more sustainable method of transport.
I think Rachel would like to come in as well to help answer that.
Oh, it was actually to respond to the first part of the question about the activities not adding up to 107. There are two grey actions which are not due to be started, that weren't included in the report, and an abandoned black action. So they do add up to 107, just to reassure you.
Thank you for that clarification. Okay, I know we've got a couple more questions coming in, but just to respond to you, Councillor Evans, I know I went to the CJC Scrutiny Committee last week, and bike spaces at the redevelopment of the Cardiff Central Station are including charge provision. So I'll move on then to next question from Councillor Stuart Ashley.
What I was looking at was the RAG, the initial RAG, the starting one works in going through the work streams. Obviously, concern is when we look at red and amber. Obviously, signing off green is a delight, and the blue that we've actually completed work. The more detail you get when you go to the progress report. I mean, we're obviously talking about bikes. We've got travel expense policies and review of the cycle work scheme. They're on the red, and that's worrying because that's both policies that I think we flagged up from the beginning. I get the carbon bit because that's the whole thing that we're here for. So all through all this, the RAG is really, really useful. The colour scheme, because it does illustrate the members considerably where we're progressing and not progressing. I'm having chaired this a few years myself. David's welcome to this one, but in a sense that how we progress this is very easily illustrated for members, I think, along with the numbers. What I'm interested in is how we get progress on this, because we haven't started on some of it. I think Rachel alluded to that. How we get progress on the stuff that we haven't even started is interesting, and how we go forward. I'm giving those as illustration, although I've been known to go on about bicycles as well. When we get to the next section, where is it now? So I'm using a tablet here as well. When we use the RAG in a different way, how do you see action sheet performance? How do you see us progressing this? Because this is obviously what the scrutiny is about, and how we can talk about all the elements of the various work programs. I mean, I'm probably concerned more about nature bit, because I think that's difficult. The concrete stuff around electric cars and vehicles and transport, that element I think is something we can measure quite well. The one that really worries me is the nature aspects of it, to be quite frank. I'd be interested to hear what your response is to how we use the system and how we get progress on it, because obviously we've been sat on this for a couple of years now.
Okay.
Does that make sense, what I'm saying, Dave?
I think you're passing some observations. I think there's a question as to how we measure progress in some of the areas, and I think there was particular reference to the red actions, if I heard you right, Councillor Ashton?
Yeah, red and amber, we need to be progressing. Some stuff looks really, really good, and some stuff I'm a bit frustrated about because we should have started.
Okay. All right. I think Rachel's happy to come in on that, so thank you.
Thanks for that question. I was just going to give you an update on the two red actions that relate to travel expenses and the cycle to work scheme. Those actions have actually been pulled forward into this year's delivery plan, because last year there was an issue with capacity, and we have made some progress on both of those, so I'm kind of pleased to report that. So in terms of the reviewing the cycle to work scheme, leadership have actually agreed a new scheme and provider that will supply e-bikes, so that's very positive. And there'll be more information to come from HR on that, and to launch it in the next few months. And then in terms of the reviewing travel expenses, HR also looked at that, and they're introducing a new 20p per mile payment for use of e-bikes, which again is good, and they're going to be issuing new guidance for staff on that too. So there has been some movement on that one, I'm pleased to report.
Thank you very
much. The only other red I could see in there is planning permission. That was the other sticker as far as I could see. You got any on that, Rachel?
Yes, so that's to do with taking a brook on the British out of culverts, and I think the commentary, the Route to Green commentary, talks about having to do some more detailed design work on the watercourse, which has caused delays, but they've set out their Route to Green there, so I think that's progressing now as well.
Thank you. And then obviously we've got all these ambers, which are neither, you know, they're not reds and they're not greens, but they're works in progress. So obviously my colleagues are come in on that lot.
Yep, thank you for that. I think that was helpful to get sort of news hot off the press in relation to those two red actions. I know we've got a few people wanted to come in, so I'll bring in Councillor Janet Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Two questions. I'm not sure if it's the right area to be discussing. Improving our recycling figures. When are we going to roll out the curbside collections for small household items such as toasters, kettles, etc.? That's what I'm constantly being asked. And secondly, how do we propose promoting and maximising our strategies going forward and process, because it is quite important.
Apologies, Councillor Jones, we couldn't hear you very clearly. Could you repeat that second part?
Certainly. We talk about maximising active travel activities. Are we going out into local forums to the public and to our schools to promote active travel? Because I think it's quite essential and part of our well-being under the county plan.
Thank you, that was a lot clearer. Who'd like to pick this one up, please? Mark.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Yes, small electrical items, obviously that is planned within our delivery plan for Raise the Rate. That's currently under review at the moment as we progress along the various work packages. So within Raise the Rate, we're making good progress on the key deliverables, and as such, we will be reviewing that timescale. So once that timescale is reviewed in terms of all those actions, we'll come forward and advise members accordingly. So, but that's definitely on one of our main priorities going forward. In terms of active travel, yes, we are within schools. We've undertaken some significant grant funding and used that to engage and promote active travel, especially with schools. We're into schools as well to do active travel plans as well, to engage with school children, to plot how and when they travel to school, and to assess what can be done to ease that and encourage greater participation in active travel modes.
Thank you very much for that.
Can I come back in? Chair, can I come back with a supplementary? Are all our schools engaging? Are all our schools engaging in the active travel plans?
My understanding is no, not all of them. But obviously the resources, and that's not a criticism of schools. That's just a reflection of limited resources within the department. But obviously we select. I think we do about 7 to 9 active travel plans per year, and our ambition is to work through schools to cover them all. So it's just a resourcing issue internally. But I understand that when we do go into schools, we are met with a great deal of enthusiasm and assistance, both from the staff and the children.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Chair.
That was very helpful, I think, to give us that extra detail. Thank you, Mark. I now got Councillor Seaborn.
Thank you, Chair. My question is about procurement, and I hear that we can't dictate to our staff what they drive to work, etc. But I just wondered whether we've considered procurement offering local government staff 0% interest loans or leasing options for electric vehicles. I know some firms are doing it. My grandson's actually part of a scheme within his works, and I just wondered whether local government were doing that.
Okay, I don't know whether that's Mark or whether procurement lead would like to speak on that.
I'll just express a point. It's a good question, Councillor Seaborn, and I'm not able to answer that question at the moment. I'll certainly come back to you, but it's a very good point. I know the council does undertake a sort of salary sacrifice scheme for vehicles. I'm assuming there are electric vehicles within that. So that's one mechanism in which we do work with sort of our employees to promote that sort of form of transport. But other than that, Councillor Seaborn, I can't elaborate any further, unfortunately.
Thank you. It's an expensive business changing your car into electric, and if there was some kind of procurement on offer for leasehold or 0% interest, you might get more take-up.
Okay, I think hold that thought, members, because we might want to make some points out of this meeting. So thank you for that. Just checking whether officers want to come in? No? Okay, so Councillor Mark Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much. Right, this is about active travel again. You say we got grants to go into schools and everything else to promote active travel, but can I suggest that perhaps we spend this grant money on giving us something to actively travel on? During the summer, I got quite fed up of, on a regular basis, sending complaints in because pathways and everything else was overgrown. There's not a lot of cutting going on. I've never seen a borough so untidy and unkempt. And now we've come to the dark nights. You can't travel or walk anywhere because everything is pitch black, including the cycleways at the got lights. They'll have lights for so many yards and then pitch black, so it's not safe. You don't know who's around, and vulnerable people, they won't feel safe going out. And in the dark, the surfaces are not the best, so they become trip hazards. So we're going to then be spending more money in our A&E. So is there any way, this is a simple fix, that this we could look into this, please?
Thank you very much. I think that's a very clear question. Who'd like to pick that up? Dan. Is it? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Jones, for that question. The way we currently maintain the green space across Torvine, the team works on a 10-day cycle, cutting the sort of overgrowth that exists in terms of grass verges and the grassed areas that are not being left to go to nature. So we are currently committed to review our arrangements for green space maintenance, and we do have a report going to scrutiny next month, which will look at the service standards and how well that is delivered for the benefit of residents and keeping areas free and hampered to be able to, you know, as you say, cycle and walk and so on and so forth. So that is something that we're currently looking to review. If people do report issues, particular issues, we do have a mechanism for us to receive those and to respond to those if there is increased growth in certain areas, because we are aware that with changes to weather patterns, that the vegetation is growing differently to how it did previously. So there is a need for us to consider that. But you know, as it is at the moment, we do have a schedule, and we try to keep up with that as best as possible. Sometimes there are reasons why we can't deliver to time because of weather, because of resource implications and so on. But hopefully all of those details will come through in the scrutiny, and we can have questions raised through members to challenge some of the service provision and the standards that we currently have. I don't know, Steve Williams, if there's anything that you want to add in terms of our green space maintenance arrangements.
Well, just briefly, just to add to what Dan has said, in terms of the way we manage vegetation, particularly for biodiversity, it's really important that health and safety comes first. So if there's any issues around areas which have been left primarily for to help us around nature emergency, then actually health and safety comes first. So just to add to what Dan has said, you know, there are mechanisms in place to manage these areas, and we wouldn't want you know, areas to be left for biodiversity, which would cause a health and safety issue as well. So yeah, so exactly what Dan said, really.
Okay, I think Mark would like to...
Chair, yeah, can I just come back now? I went on about areas of biodiversity, just on about in general pathways, even in Pontypool Park, some of the pathways with nearly impassable. On that, can you clarify that? I know the last few years that our team that used to go out doing a fly tipping, whatever, that working 4 on, 4 off, they would often cut back weeds, weeds, brambles, etc. Is that now not happening? And 2, nobody have answered what our lighting issue is in the borough again, please.
Yeah, Mark would like to come back on that.
Thanks, Councillor Jones. Yeah, I'll defer to Dan in terms of the cutting back of vegetation, but one thing I will say is that we are reviewing how we manage our assets as well to ensure there are clear, defined roles and responsibilities within each team so that assets don't fall between stools, and so we know exactly who's responsible for what in terms of cutting back. And Dan might want to come back on that in a minute. But in terms of the lighting of active travel routes, this is a challenge that is faced across Wales in terms of when to light and when not to light. It's clearly, obviously, as you're aware, with our climate and nature emergency, we want to reduce the energy consumption that we undertake within the authority as well. So we look very carefully where and when we need to light our infrastructure. Just to let you know as well, in terms of companies' cycle to work schemes, they do cover good quality bike lights as well within that. So it's not just providing the bikes, staff can also gain access to equipment such as head torches and bike lights as well as part of that sort of salary sacrifice scheme. So there is, I think, a recognition and a requirement that if you're using the active travel routes at night, there's a form of responsibility upon yourself to ensure you have adequate lighting. However, what we're looking at, and I take up your point, Councillor Jones, as well, in terms of some authorities have looked at these fluorescent studs at the periphery of the active travel routes, so cyclists can see where the route is going in the dark as well. So I hope that's helpful. Dan, did you want to come back?
Yeah, thanks Mark and thanks Councillor Jones. Just in relation to the question relating to the 4 on, 4 off team, they primarily work on a reactive basis to deal with, as you said, issues that arise such as fly tipping, which might be hazardous to people, car accidents that occur on the highway to assist in with clean-up after then to those occurrences to remove any risks. Equally, if issues get reported, such as falling trees and so on, they will assist with those issues which cause a hazard. And then they will also undertake, if there isn't the reactive work coming in, some planned work. But primarily, the green space maintenance is carried out by each of the 5 area teams that operate across the borough. So that's how we organise the work. I see that Andrew, our group leader for environment, is on the screen there as well. So I don't know, Andrew, if there's anything that you'd like to add in terms of the operations of the 4 on, 4 off team.
Just to mention, I suppose the priority is always the important and priority issues such as smash glass, dog fouling, as you mentioned, litter and fly tipping. Although, you know, if there's if those priorities are not extensive at any particular time, then we can drop them into other issues, other things to deal with, cutting back. But generally, it doesn't involve cutting back with the 4 on, 4 off.
Okay, thank you for the...
Thank you. Just definitely one little last one. We go back to the lighting. It's not just the cycleways and that, it's obviously streets as well. And what's embarrassing, a couple of my ward members have come to me, and so they are walking home in pitch darkness. I know we've only just got to dark, but going back to last year as well, and since last year, it's 12 months now, that our bright new Pontypool and Newin railway station is still not open, but every night it's like a Parisian beacon. Every light down there is shining brightly. You can see it from anywhere. So that is a bit embarrassing them when it's not in use, yet our public highways, or if people got to walk home, in pitch darkness.
I think that's a fair observation, Councillor Jones. I'm just conscious there are other people waiting to come in. I think we need to make sure we capture some of this for the Environment and Economy Scrutiny Committee, which is coming up soon under your chairmanship. So I think there's going to be a few questions that we'll have for that. We note that. If there's a very small observation you want to make, Mark, because I've got 3 or 4 people waiting.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to be clear, if there are specific issues in terms of wards, in terms of lighting, then obviously quite happy to ward members and discuss that. And just to explain that the railway station is under the operational responsibility of TfW and Network Rail and not the authority.
But we can note the concerns, I think. Right, I'm going to move on to Councillor Nick Haller, but I just would note that there may be some opportunities for us to consider sort of passive lighting reflectors in some of our routes for active travel. Let's not lose that one. Okay, Councillor Haller.
So I want to continue on from that. At last year's meeting to discuss this, I also brought this up. So I take on board what Mark is saying, and Mark is saying. My question really, I have several questions, but my first question is on this. Some reflective markers on the corridors that we travel down on faster push bikes than other bikes would be beneficial. I get the fact that lighting is better for bicycles and that the bicycle lights are brighter. But when you go down a road in a car and you find the street, you look at the cat's eyes that there, you can actually see the path of the traffic where you're travelling. So I really do think that's really important to follow on and take on. My other questions are related about travelling to work schemes. We go to the Civic quite often. We very rarely see any push bikes or bicycles outside the doors. And I'm a great believer that those bikes are not outside the doors because of the potential risk of theft, because people might look at the bike. So right now, there still isn't any secure places for people to use electric bikes. And bearing in mind, an electric bike can be from anything from £2,000 to £12,000 plus. Nobody really wants to leave those bikes outside the doors. So there's no secure space for me to leave my bike if I wanted to travel down to the Civic. My next question is about charging spaces at the Civic. I don't believe that there is any EVC charging spaces for members of Torvine to use on their cars. And my last question is, what percentage of the fleet, of Torvine's fleet, will be electric by 2030? Sorry, too much to digest.
Quite a lot of questions there, Councillor Haller.
Sorry.
That's okay. I think we note the thing about the passive lighting. I think we note the bit about the travel to work scheme and secure bits. Again, I'd ask members to keep some of these things in mind because we will be making some recommendations from this committee. And I'll give Mark the opportunity to come back.
Thank you, Councillor Hall, for those questions. Bike parking at the Civic, yes, it's a very good point that you make, not just in the middle of Pontypool as well. We are striving to secure bike parking in the area, and the work has gone underway. I think it's just finding the optimum position, but that is a point well made, and we are seeking to deliver that. Graham, did you want to comment on that? Sorry.
Yeah, in relation to the car charging at the Civic, we have secured funding to put, I believe it's 3 double chargers in the Civic Centre car park. We're awaiting the denouement of the wider redevelopment there via the Levelling Up Fund to put them in, but it is a plan to put them in there. Now, they would just be standard chargers. Our original hope was also to integrate an ultra-rapid charger into the Civic. Now, that's not currently feasible. However, we have secured funding and an agreement from National Grid to secure an ultra-rapid charger at the Riverside car park, so we're only a very short distance away, and it is our intention to get that installed and operational this financial year.
Mark?
Yeah, if I can come back, Councillor Hall, on the fleet issue, just to let you know, you're probably aware of the report. We have been delayed in terms of our fleet rationalisation. So the logic is to rationalise our fleet at the moment to make sure that we've only got the number of vehicles, the correct type of vehicles that we need. So we can jettison some of the vehicles that are not fully utilised. At that point, then, we will look at trying to transition to EV. You will probably be aware we have a challenge at the moment that if you're looking at the large HGVs, they're exceedingly expensive to transition from diesel to electric. And obviously, we're building up business cases now to look at that. The issue that we got, though, is that with small goods vehicles, I think the technology is there to have that reliability to transition to electric vehicles, and the cost transition isn't significant. When you come to HGVs, I don't think the market is mature enough at this current time, and we do have to wrestle with the issue of emerging technologies such as hydrogen. We're keeping a watching brief at the moment, especially with on a regional basis to see what's happening. We don't want to go down the, if I can use an analogy, down the Betamax route, or where there's a VMS issue coming on. We're looking at what that emerging market is. It's clear, as I say, just to reiterate, it's just at the moment, the electric market is immature for heavy goods vehicles, and a lot of nations are putting R&D into hydrogen. So we're just waiting to see as the market matures, then we will act. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, can I just come back on that? So could it be feasible that we won't actually hit zero carbon within our fleet by 2030 because the technology is not there?
I think, again, we have to phrase it in net zero carbon. It may well be the proportion can be netted off by, let's say, our land holdings or renewable energy. But I think Mark has set the scene quite well. Insofar as our small fleet, I think it's in play for either all of them to have transitioned to lower zero carbon emissions, or there will be a couple that are within the next year or two beyond 2030 on a simple basis of lease, or there's no point in quite replacing it yet. It's not a cost of, it'll operate. The issue there is for the larger vehicles. We're not aware of that. But for small vehicles, I think it is within play. And it's worth noting as well, the works have been completed for upgrading the grid at T-Blind. So we have the capacity to deliver the electricity needed to power the fleet, so that from a technical perspective, we are able to continue to transition.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very helpful. I know there's a couple of questioners that still want to come in, and I've got Councillor Williams, Councillor Parish and Councillor Ashley again, but I'm also conscious that a couple of our colleagues online, the officers around procurement, will need to leave at 3. So can I just bear in mind if anybody's got any particular procurement questions to lodge those? Okay, so I'll go to Councillor Lucy Williams.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for this report and for the appendices, actually, which are really, really helpful reading. My question is actually about procurement. I wanted to go back to that. I was looking at 4.43. So, completely understanding that the whole, because as you quite rightly indicated at the beginning, that what's not in our control is the whole supply chain thing, which is clearly very complex, way beyond the boundary of Torvine itself. It's a big issue. And it was useful reading the appendices that there are sort of useful conversations going on to look at that. What I'd be interested in hearing, and perhaps our colleagues online can help, is that you're having these conversations with sort of lead providers of high energy, sort of on high energy issues. I wonder if you might be able to sort of perhaps update on any of those conversations and how that's coming along? Because that's clearly a very key issue in bringing down our carbon emissions.
Okay, I think that's a good opportunity to bring John in.
In terms of more widely, we've developed quite a bit of guidance and training for staff. So just in terms of particularly on circular procurement, we've developed quite a lot of materials around buying responsibly. So using the procurement hierarchy of reusing and making sure that when we're specifying for stuff, we get maximum amount of recycled products in there. We're just about to kick off a project across the 4 Ardal councils with RAP Cymru and others, looking at how we can take carbon out in terms of 3 categories of spend. So we are looking at food, highways and social care homes. So that will bring together officers from the 4 councils with experts to look at existing tenders and contracts and what we do now, and then look at what the options are, not just in terms of carbon reduction, but if there's climate mitigations that could be built into our tenders and specifications to future-proof us for the changing climate that we're all facing on a day-to-day basis. So I suppose we are looking to collaborate as much as possible. So a lot of this guidance that we've developed on behalf of the South East Wales 10 councils, and they've adopted that. We want to signify as a region to the market what we're looking for in terms of what we will do, but also what we expect them to do to help us meet our net zero ambitions. We are only looking to, it's a pass-fail question in tenders now that, they've got to commit to being net zero by 2050. So we're looking to strengthen. We would like to move quicker, but, I think we're making good progress, and certainly not just within Wales, but further afield, people are looking at what we're trying to do and how we're trying to move forward. I hope that gets the nub of what you were asking.
Thank you very much for that, John. Are you okay with that, Councillor?
I wonder if I can have a supplementary question to that. Thank you very much. That's really useful. Just mentioning that the whole thing about the development of using hydrogen, because I guess that in terms of forward planning, because that technology is developing quite fast, or ish. It's moving in that direction. So I guess it's something about understanding how current planning around electric vehicles, like you're saying, big vehicles, how you're keeping that conversation in mind when it looks at the developing technologies in relation to something like hydrogen, which is going to be talked about.
Yeah, it's a valid question, and I think ultimately this is not a cop-out. I think this is the correct answer, insofar as we're not making any decisions on heavy goods vehicles at this stage. We're reasonably certain the transition for small vehicles we know is going to be electric, and as a result, but yes, we're awaiting industry and wider infrastructure and supply chains to provide a solution, and then we will be able to make that decision. And whether that decision is electric, hydrogen, or indeed fossil fuel or a biofuel mix, we don't know. But we're not going to make those decisions until we can see, as Mark alluded to, the industry matures and provides solutions for us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think Councillor Morgan would like to come in as well.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to say that the policy choices that face the Council as we go forward in the realms of new technologies and new forms of energy, the hydrogen versus electric discussion, all of these things, I think it's really important that members stay briefed on them. So I've asked officers particularly to bear in mind that challenge of ensuring that we all keep our knowledge around these emerging technologies as up to date as we can, and that where there might be policy choices for the Council, that we're able to take them in an informed and a measured way. So it's definitely very much on my radar, and something that Mark, I know, is aware we want to keep abreast as members.
Thank you for that, and I think Mark would like to add to that slightly.
Thank you, Chair. Just a very quick one, really, on the electric vehicles. Only just to come back on, just something that struck me, is that we already have 2 electric vehicles on our residual collection route. We've purchased those. We're working collaboratively with the manufacturers as well to research and to improve those vehicles. So we haven't stepped away from electrics or HGVs. We're working closely with the manufacturers. To be truthful, there have been a number of teething problems. I think the manufacturer will accept that they've benefited immensely from the time we've been able to work with Torvine to try and iron out those issues. Those issues then obviously will transition into their future manufacturing productions and making better products going forward. So we are at the cutting edge really of that technology as well.
Thank you very much, Mark. Right, I know there's a couple more questions. I've got Councillor Parish, then Councillor Ashley, then Councillor Collett-Thomas. So, Councillor Parish.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm looking at the local flood risk management strategy, and the tender was planned for this in May, June this year. But going on to page 73, it says it's delayed, well, it's behind stroke delayed. Could you bring us up to date with that, please?
Who'd like to pick that one up, please? I think probably Mark. Is that?
Thank you, Chair. To be honest with you, I haven't got that answer to hand. So if I may, I'll respond formally via a response.
Certainly. So your question is noted. We don't have an immediate response, Councillor Parish, but the question is noted and we'll make sure that it's answered, okay?
That's fine, thank you.
Thank you very much. I then have Councillor Ashley and then Councillor Collett-Thomas. So Councillor Ashley.
Yeah, I did say earlier I'd been looking at nature emergency, and it's a few for Steve, I suspect. The tree strategy and carbon I can never say the word certification, and linking in the various activities we've got going on with voluntary groups, tree planting and all that. I noted when I was on the canal group the other week that we're doing activities that need taking trees out, and our policy of replanting trees. Also things like we've been talking about active travel routes. There are obviously a lot of trees along those, and the green spaces and all the involvement that we're having. I'm summarising a bit because it cuts across a couple of strategies. The Action Area 4 is the main one for this, but it does involve local community groups as well with this. It's a wonderful activity, and some of the more controversial areas of this as well have already been mentioned about safety and that. I think the strategies that we've got on nature emergency, that this is all involved with it, and active communities. So can we have what I'm mainly concerned about is we're one of the most wooded boroughs in Wales, and maintaining that without losing stuff, which I think we're in danger of at times, is important. Also, how we go forward. My other concern is that we've got a lot of really good workers in place in the council working with volunteers, and I'm aware that some of these are not on full-time contracts, and also that they're on project work, which is very valuable. How do we maintain all this good work that we've got doing, bearing in mind that a lot of it is project work? I asked that question because I'm aware of that.
Okay, I think that the summary here is essentially that we have a lot of staff on projects who are sort of on fixed-term basis, and how we maintain some of the progress that we've been making. Quite a detailed question. I don't know who'd like to come back on that.
It necessarily is, Chair.
Andrew? Andrew Osborne. Right, sorry, Andrew.
Apologies, Chair. I was going to reply on the questions about the tree strategy and the tree work from Councillor Ashley, if that's okay.
Yes, please, Andrew, and then somebody else can reply on the contracts as well.
Okay, thank you. And in terms of the, you mentioned that we talked last week in the canal group about trees being taken out. I think it was more about tree management along the canal. and perhaps trimming rather than taking trees out. But having said that, as we all know, trees do sometimes require removal. But the intention is now, through the exercise we've been doing, where we are undertaking a full sort of mapping exercise now of all trees in Torvine and plotting those on Arlai. The intention going forward is that we keep a measure of tree canopy loss and tree canopy gain. So therefore, we can monitor closely then, but hopefully that we are continually increasing our tree canopy cover rather than having a loss. Hopefully that's
a wonderful answer, Andrew.
Thanks.
Great. Okay. I think there was the wider point of the range of activities, and in some respects I would suggest that sort of summarised on page 40 with BER 17, looking at the range of environmental activities, which is talking about community groups and volunteers. So I don't know if any officers would like to sort of say how they feel we might be able to go forward if we have a significant reliance on term-based staff posts.
That question I really want answered because it worries me.
And I think that's probably a question for the whole council, and probably a wider issue, but I think perhaps the senior officers could make an initial assessment. Mark.
Yeah, it's thank you, Councillor. It's obviously the term-based contracts. I guess there is a challenge, obviously, in terms of retaining staff and obviously equitable employment rights as well. So we're across the board. We're looking at reviewing our use of staff as well, not just in sort of the street scene side of things, but across the board, to try and ensure that we transition from reliance on temporary staff more into transitioning into sort of permanent contracts, full-time contracts, apprenticeships, that sort of thing. So there's a workforce transition element really. So that's an overarching response, I guess, but that's a commitment that we're trying to do in terms of transition our workforce into sort of, and also to provide opportunities for local residents as well going forward, so that they have a permanent career with us. So I hope that helps.
Thank you. Can I make a comment on that, if I may, please? That's a very fair answer, to be honest. The other point is a lot of these staff that we've got working at the moment are working incredibly effectively with local community and volunteers. So they're driving a lot of the activity. And I just think that observation we will need to make, because it's important. They're mainly junior staff, but they work at an incredible level.
I think that's a helpful observation, and I think we obviously need to take that into account when we, as members, are asked to sort of like to scrutinise the budget, which will be another thing that comes before this committee. Right, I know I've got Councillor Colette Thomas would like to come in.
Thank you, Chair. My question is about biodiversity, and I'm just wondering about the local nature recovery action plan. It's a bit delayed or behind. Will we be on target for that to be delivered in 24-25, please?
Who'd like to pick that up, Steve?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the Nature Recovery Action Plan is primarily a plan for the local nature partnership. That's the Blaenau Gwent and Torvine LNP. It is almost finished. It is on the LNP website for people to look at. I understand there are some amendments that are going to be discussed at a meeting next month, I think. So there is progress. It is primarily a document for the local nature partnership. The key document for the Council is the Biodiversity Ecosystem Resilience Plan, but the Nature Recovery Action Plan is progressing well. And like I said, there is some amendments that need to be made, and discussions being held next month to take that forward.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Is that okay, Councillor Thomas?
That's fine, thank you.
If
Thank you,
I
that's
can
good.
just add that I've actually, with a different hat on, been to one or two of the LNP meetings, so I'm aware that this has been discussed at some length and has gone through. a different sort of drafting process. So I just back up what Steve has said in terms of what I've seen. So I now have Councillor Nick Haller.
Thank you, Chair. To increase the areas of council-owned grassland by management for biodiversity and ecosystems, very much on my kind of radar of really liking this. However, within communities, people don't understand why we're doing this, and they think that we are being lazy as a council because we're not cutting the grass on a regular basis. And the amount of times that I've had to talk to members of my community about this, saying we're doing it because of a reason. Is there any way that we could get this message out into the communities in a better way than there is currently right now? Because, yes, I get the fact that we put some signage on these areas. Some of them areas have it. But the general view of many people within my community especially is that we're just being too lazy because we're not cutting the grass, and there's not a reason why we're doing this. We kind of get the fact that the reason's there because of a reason, because of the biodiversity and flood management and everything else that's related around it. But I really don't think our members of our community understand the real reason.
Okay, I think maybe I'll give the officers a chance to come in, but I think we've obviously done a certain amount of this, and it's something that we've seen some of the signs around the No Mow May, for example, which has been fairly prevalent. But who'd like to come in on this one? Steve?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Haller. An interesting question. This approach we've taken in terms of changing the management of some of our green space has been a hard sell. There's no doubt about that. It's a change to the norm. It's a change to the traditional way we manage our green space. And the way you take the community with you is communicating the reasons for doing it. And you can never do enough consultation and communication. We've done a fair amount. It is quite a resource-hungry process, but I agree we need to do a lot more. It is interesting that there is a lot of people who, as you say, don't necessarily agree or don't understand what we're trying to achieve. But interestingly, there are a lot of people who do understand as well. And I'm heartened by that. But we've got to continue to work to communicate why we're doing this. And like I said, it's a very hard sell. Traditionally, we've cut urban green space on a regular cycle. To go to a once annual cut on certain areas, and this is only potentially a small amount of urban green space which is being looked at in a different way. It is difficult, but you know, I agree we need to do a lot more. We need to look at opportunities to continue in communicating the importance.
Can I come back in on this one?
Sorry,
is it right if I just come back? Stephen, yeah. I take on board your comments. I think, yes, we do need to do more. I think through the conversations I've had engaging with the community in Blaenavon, we've discussed areas and we've gone back to Veronica to change the areas and reform the areas to make them more suitable for both sides of it. But there's one little niggle that's going on. The reason we grow this areas for biodiversity, but at the same time, when it gets to the stage where the biodiversity is actually going to help, i.e. when it's going to seed and it's the flowers and the plants that are in these areas are going to seed and they're going to let, that's the area that's the time of the year then it's looking pretty shabby because of the nature of the plant and everything else. And then we get a lot of comments saying that there's a lot of people that take their dogs onto these areas and it can't be seen of what they're doing on it. And it's just the latter part of the season going into the September when it is cut back that to me is an ideal opportunity to say why we've done it and what we've done during the season to get to where we have. I think it might be some form of actually saying we're trying to put more back into the land from itself, if that makes sense.
Steve wants to come back. Yep.
Yeah. Thanks for that follow-on question, Councillor Haller. I think the important thing here is we're on a massive learning curve with this process, and we won't have got it right in all the areas. And maybe there's a need to review when these areas are cut. There's certainly areas which will take a longer time to transition from what is primarily rank grassland to one which is dominated by wildflowers. And there needs to be a bit of patience in that. I think some areas will come on quicker, other areas will take a lot longer, and that will depend on each individual area. So there has to be a bit of patience, I think. We are regularly monitoring these selection of areas to make certain that we know what's going on, and we use that information then to feed into any changes that might be needed. The point you made about changing or reacting to concerns from the community about certain areas, that's always been built into this process from day one. Members who have attended the member seminars, which I've done over recent years, will know that this is a flexible approach where we've chosen areas where there may be reasons why we have to move because they're trapping litter, or there's other usages for the areas which we weren't aware of at the time. Then we will take that on board, and we will move. So it's a flexible approach, and like I said, it's a learning curve, and we have to be flexible while we're learning.
Yeah, right. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And I think
Yes.
one other observation I would make is when we look at on page 40B, R17, I think we perhaps do have some scope to work with some of the community groups to help with some of that messaging. I'm not sure that we made full use of that. So I just, personal observation, given that we seem to have gone a little quiet in our climate ambassadors as one potential tool, for example. Okay. I think I've now got Councillor Lucy Williams and then Councillor Stuart Ashley. And then if I can suggest to members, think if there's anything else you want to raise, because we'll want to draw to a close within time, enough time to look at considering our recommendations. So, Councillor Lucy Williams.
Thank you. I think this question relates to this work stream 4 as well, but if it doesn't, I'm sorry. So this is the one about which is similar to the other questions. What I'm not quite understanding, perhaps a bit better. There's always a big balance, isn't there, between protecting our natural resources, understanding land usage, and protecting the biodiversity, and the need for building more houses. So I'm just trying to understand the relationship between, so in planning, how that balance is kept when there's planning permission for various developments, and how that, if this whole question is fed into the planning sort of process, because that's fairly key, isn't it, to keep that balance between sufficient land to increase and sustain biodiversity and land also needed for housing. So just to kind of understand that relationship a bit better, if that makes sense.
I think Steve again.
Yeah, thanks for that question. Yeah, planning is an interesting issue, isn't it? And Planning Policy Wales was reviewed. A new edition of Planning Policy Wales came out in February this year. And Chapter 6 of that document deals with natural resources and natural environment. And it was substantially reviewed and made stronger. So planning has a major role in playing in delivering on green infrastructure, the climate and nature emergencies. And if you read that guidance, it's very good. It talks about sustainable development, talks about ensuring that development does not deliver any biodiversity net loss. In fact, what it says is each development should provide a biodiversity net gain. So we approach, when we respond to planning applications, we approach it in that way, that every development has to provide a net biodiversity gain. And planning policy says that if they can't provide that, and there are no overriding issues that need to be taken on board, then actually planning should be refused. But some of the, the volume house builders in particular understand that, and they build that into their plans. What's less well known, I think, is where you've got householder developers, people who want to put a planning application in for an extension or whatever. They don't necessarily understand that actually even down to that level, they have to try and avoid any biodiversity impact and also provide, if possible, a net biodiversity gain.
Very helpful. I think Mark would like to come in as well.
Yes, thanks, Councillor Williams. Going on from what Steve said really as well, is we're looking at, in terms of not just the planning policy rails, but obviously the sustainable urban drainage as well, in terms of ensuring that surface water doesn't enter into our water systems immediately, so there's attenuation demands. But as part of that, we're looking at that biodiversity element as well. So you haven't just got the planning element, you've got the engineering elements that underpin the design of those estates. And we're looking at potentially, as a result of that, developers are coming back and saying that on average about 30% of their sites are now being given over either to sustainable urban drainage and or biodiversity as well. So there is a significant swing in sort of how developments are brought forward.
Thank you.
Can I just ask a quick supplementary question to that, as you talked about urban drainage? So when it comes to sort of like small, as you're saying, domestic planning, so small plan, for instance, when you see permission for like new drives to be developed, and you very often see developments where there is no drainage, so the runoff water collectively could be enormous. So would that particular detail be built into sort of planning, if they're like extensions or driveway developments? Would that be built into that particular sort of planning process?
Yeah, what happens is the SAB regulations of sustainable urban drainage are triggered if you extend your impermeable surface by 100 square metres. So if you do a small minor amendment, then those requirements aren't triggered. But that doesn't mean you have to have an additional amount. If you change the nature in which an area of ground drains, that could trigger the regulations as well. So that's the sort of yardstick that we use.
Okay, very helpful.
Thank you for that. Right, I think we just have Councillor Ashley. Would like another question?
Yeah, well, I wasn't going to ask this question, but I will do now. As I sit on the planning committee, the one question I want to, because it's a big moot national thing, and it is are we actually allowing plastic lawns, plastic this and plastic that everywhere? It's a big national question. It's not on this, but it really ought to be sometimes. But what Mark's just said about sustainable urban drainage, and you're finding people putting plastic everything in their back gardens now. I wondered about that. That's a separate question. Wasn't what I was going to ask. But I see that as a very, very controversial question amongst people that care about it. I'll ask Mark that one. I'm going to go on to what I was going to ask about, which was more Steve's country. I was on page 86, which is about the land around the Blorenge, which Steve likes to take us around when we do the nature thing, and looking at the bogs up there. We've got a lot of bogs around the top end of the borough in the heritage. We've also got them around Cwmbran if you go up on the mountain in the commons. And I was looking at biodiversity and the stuff up around there, and Steve's really good on this. It doesn't seem to be reflected in this document. I'm sure it is in one way or another. The species decline, which is the bit I haven't seen in here, the red book, and butterflies and bees and all the rest of it. We haven't got that in here. Where is it? I wondered where that was. Also, the importance of stuff that we've got around the place, like the bogs, which actually take more than trees do in terms of carbon sequestration. I can never say the word, and the floodplains around the Abbey, which you've shown us around, Steve, that they don't seem to be mentioned in here, but they're rather important landscapes in this borough.
Okay, I think, are you happy to answer that question, Steve? Probably falls for you, I think. Yeah, and Mark will take the last part. Okay.
There's plastic. They're better than mine.
I'll say, okay, thank you, Councillor Hall. Ashley.
Hall, colleague.
In terms of peatland or bogs, you're quite right in raising that. We've got a number of peatland habitats, mainly in the upland areas of Torfaen. You know, there's some quite large ones around Blaenavon, and at the headwaters of the Afon Newydd, they can play quite an important role in mitigating water runoff. Really, really important for carbon storage and substantial biodiversity value as well. So they are very, very important. They are a priority habitat within Wales, listed as Section 7 of the Environment Wales Act. We always try to work in partnership with landowners to ensure that these habitats are retained and managed accordingly. It is sometimes difficult to work in partnership with some landowners, but we always seek to do that. But you know, where we've got these peatland habitats on land that we own, and I know we've got a few around Mynedlan, Hilleth, and so on, we will always put in place measures which can be quite cheap measures actually to improve the peatland habitat and improve the bogs, holding water in the landscape and allowing it to be released gradually to help us with issues around flood mitigation as well.
Thank you for that, Steve. And then to Mark.
Thanks, Councillor Hall. Yeah, just going on from Steve's area as well, I suppose, and you're probably aware, it's as part of one of these sort of subsets of the climate and nature emergency, we have the flood risk management strategy, and that really underpins the area that we're looking at in terms of uplands water management. You're very right in terms of it's a fundamental issue here. I always remember when I first joined as well, Rachel O'Shaughnessy saying the upland sort of peat bogs are our own Amazon rainforest in terms of the ability for carbon sequestration, and that's really stuck with me. And we're working hard with private landowners as well up there. So, as you're probably aware, Caris Williams as well is leading on the flood risk management strategy on my behalf. As I say, working hard to bring those schemes forward as part of that sort of work package. So we'll provide you with updates on that. Going forward, in terms of your grass and your astroturf, again, yes, where where the drainage characteristics are altered from the original by any material, we look at it carefully. So, for example, the 3G pitches that we're installing, they're over 100 square metres, and therefore they are supplemented by biodiversity improvements and sustainable urban drainage. If it's a small patch of artificial grass in someone's back garden, if it doesn't exceed 100 square metres usually, then we don't really look at that. But if it's significant impact, then yes, we will. I hope that helps.
Thank you. Can I just quickly come back? Thank you for that, Mark, because it's I can't say the site on there, but there's the site on X, former Twitter, about it. It is something people do get quite hot on the collar about, and it's worrying because one of the beautiful places is the domestic garden, which can be quite a saviour if you actually add up all the domestic gardens in the borough. It's actually quite a carbon capture place for nature. I'm sure Steve would add to all that, telling us how much area we've got in that, and that's not mentioned in here either. But if you cover it in plastic and concrete and various other things, it's not going to be there. So that does worry me. Also, going back to the other bit, the peatlands and etc., there was some really good stuff fairly recently on Radio 4 on that, so that's where I picked that up. It's useful to listen to these things. Thank you very much, both.
Thank you for that, Councillor Ashley. I think we now have Councillor Janet Jones.
Jan.
Just one question. Okay, can you hear me? Hello,
Yes.
can you hear me, David?
Can hear you fine, Janet. Yep.
Oh, that's brilliant, thank you. As World Heritage Champion and also Ward Council, Nick and I really are concerned of how we are managing our World Heritage landscape with the biodiversity. Are we satisfied that we are doing enough to secure, the landscape?
Okay. Steve, are you looking at me for that one?
Yeah, thanks for that question. Blaenavon is quite rich in biodiversity, as you know, Councillor, and it has a number of SSSIs, local nature reserves, sites of importance for nature conservation, all of which need management. Some areas you could allow to carry on with limited management, other areas need a little bit more. Again, we work in partnership with landowners and commoners to get management in place, particularly in relation to the SSSI and particularly in relation to the part of the SSSI that we own. I'm satisfied that we are doing as much as we can to protect and enhance the biodiversity of the World Heritage Site.
Clear statement there. So, but I think also...
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Steve. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. Great. So I think, are there no more questions? Oh, sorry, Councillor Horler. Sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow on from Councillor Jones's statement. I still think that we have a massive issue with off-roaders in this area that are destroying our landscape, and that's for another conversation. And I guess over the last 12 months, we've seen an awful lot more rainfall in this area. And we're seeing an awful lot more rain around the area that is pushing stuff down the valley an awful lot more. I had a meeting with Keris yesterday regarding an issue. Very welcome to hear what her thoughts were about it. So thank you. That was just an observation, that was all. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Horler. And again, I note, for example, on page 80, BER 22, we've got something about surveillance activities looking at fly tipping. I think it may be worth us thinking about off-road as well as an issue.
Please.
So I'm just mentioning that as something that we may want to consider, colleagues.
Yeah.
So, and I'm seeing some nods here, by the way, from officers. So I think we've had all the questions now. Last chance, because I think we now need to thank the officers and formulate any recommendations we would like to make. I see no hands. We'll move on then to say thank you very much to all the officers. Can I say thank you very much as well to all the members for, there's a very wide range of questions, and I think the officers have found that very helpful, looking at what's been going on in front of me. Some really thought-provoking questions, and you've certainly, and Councillor Morgan, I think, would like the opportunity to come back as the executive member, but that will be, I think, the final contribution. Thank you, Sue.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to draw attention to the very wide range of officers that are involved in the preparation of this monitoring and action plan, and just to thank all of those involved. This truly is a genuinely cross-cutting issue, and without the work and involvement of members and of officers across the council, we couldn't even begin to have any ambition to tackle this challenge. So, yeah, thank you to Rachel and all those who lead on it, but to everyone that contributes.
Thank you very much. So we'll give the officers the opportunity to leave, and then we'll continue. And I would thank the officers for their contributions, and on behalf of the committee, thank you to invite you to leave the meeting. But again, it's reminding members that we are still in camera once we get on to the recommendations part. Okay. The officers and the exec member have now left the chamber. So if I remind members what we've been asked as a scrutiny committee to consider when coming up with recommendations, it was firstly to assess whether the council has delivered on the climate and nature emergency objectives with sufficient progress. I think we've had a few questions there. You may want to look at some recommendations. Secondly, to determine whether the areas that have been identified for building capacity and accelerating progress will be effective in delivering those climate and nature emergency objectives. And finally, providing comments and recommendations for the relevant executive members and strategic directors on areas for improvement or in need of greater focus. So it's a question now of members, whether members have any specific recommendations they would like to make on the report. I've made a few notes myself, but if anyone would like to kick us off, then that's great. Councillor Lucy Williams.
Yes, thank you. I think that look at the recommendations now, so I guess this is the third point. I think because the whole area of procurement is quite complex, and there's obviously sort of continuing conversations, I think that would be a good recommendation to have an update and maybe some specific, or difficult to say timescales, but specific objectives, because that's such a key, because it's so. It's Wales-wide, if not nationwide, so maybe an objective around that, a recommendation around that.
Okay, yeah, I think that makes sense. So there's one about the procurement approach. I think perhaps we'd welcome some detail on the collaborative working and the procurement guidance specifically in relation to work towards net zero. Is that a fair summary? So that Niall can make a note of that. Is that okay for colleagues? Is that happy to support that? Yeah, I'm seeing some hands. Okay, does anybody else want to come in, or would you like me to?
I've got my hand up, Chair.
Great, Councillor Seaborn.
And I have, Chair.
Yeah, there's a few hands up, Chair.
Yep,
I just think on the procurement issue that we should have a recommendation that they investigate the possibility of procuring 0% interest for our staff, yes, or a leasing arrangement. I think it's a good opportunity to reduce our emissions really quite quickly if there was a loan scheme on offer and that could be procured.
Yep, I think that's very clear. I think everybody in favour of that? Yep. Yeah. That was what I had noted, so thank you. Who's Councillor Janet Jones?
Chair, I'm actively concerned that we keep promoting our active travel. So if we could have a recommendation about that, and also updates on these little, for our recycling rates.
Sorry, lost you a little bit at the last part there, Councillor Jones. I think you said something.
Our recycling rates that we need to recycling of small items.
Right, so that was the small electrical items that you mentioned, was that right? Sort of we need progress on what's happening.
Yes, please.
Yeah. Okay, I think.
Yes.
I think Geraint's captured that. I think then Councillor Nick Haller.
Yeah, I asked a couple of questions about the Civic and the charging spaces. That surely, as members, things like that, we should be kind of notified a little bit about. So it's just an observation, maybe a recommendation that they actually inform us more about what they're actually doing with these spaces. That might be useful. There's also the concern that Mark Jones mentioned about putting some better markers onto the travel, onto the cycle routes. That I really do think, if people want us to travel from the south to the north or the north to the south, there should be better visibility within those spaces. And finally, I'd like to see something about off-roading up in the heritage site. Right now, it's destroying our landscape. I get that we've got a police operation that happens, which is funded by 3 or 4 councils, but right now we're still having the elements of off-roading. I went to a meeting last week and the commoners are really concerned about off-roading, either off-roading by bikes or even by 4x4s.
Okay, thanks. Can I just check that we've captured points here? Yeah. Yeah, so I think we had 3 bits there from you, Councillor Haller. One was about the reflectors or some kind of marking along the arterial cycle routes, etc., which I had noted as well. Something about the sort of surveillance activities, etc., related to biodiversity impact with off-road vehicles, which I think was we got something on fly tipping, so I think it's important as well. And what's your third point? Sorry.
It was just basically to be informed about what progression there is at the Civic and other places for charging and bicycle storage. It was really nice to hear that they were doing something, but we've only just found out about it today.
That's a fair point. So there's perhaps a bit about regular communication.
A little bit more communication on what they're doing on the Civic to actually enhance the thought pattern of people actually travelling to work on zero carbon, i.e. bikes or whatever.
Yep, I think we've captured that. That's great. Thank you very much. I think we've got Councillor Ashley and then Councillor Seaborn.
Right. Number one was the red marker on the bicycle procurement scheme. That was brought up nearly 10 years ago. I'd like to finally see it so that people can get bikes and e-bikes if they need them. That, to my mind, if they're serious about it, they should be providing that. That's a Welsh government scheme, as far as I know. And it's not. It shouldn't be too difficult because it's probably financial, but worth us recommending. Yep. And then the other one, you had a good title for it. I can't remember what you said. The business about people on temporary contracts. You gave it a different name, didn't you, David?
Right. I think it was about looking at sustainability of some of our work if we rely too much on people with temporary contracts. Was that?
Yeah, you used a different name, which was actually quite good, I thought. But they are the people in the main delivering a lot of this, which was the important point. If Karen can get that correctly, because without, they're all the people doing the base stuff. The other thing I would like to add, it might help Nick, because I've also mentioned this point a few times, was the reflective. Putting a white line on a lot of things. It's a lot cheaper than putting reflective things. And those who have cycled a lot in the past, a white line stops you falling in the canal, Nick. In places where they've got it, it's a very simple thing, a white line. Okay. And putting them in areas where you need them would be beautiful.
Okay, I think we're looking at the simplest solutions to get effective marking of routes. That's lovely. So I think we've got Councillor Seaborn and then Councillor Jones.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think there was a recommendation to continue to rationalise the vehicles of the fleet, either to electric, hydrogen or emerging technologies.
Yeah, so I think there's a piece there, isn't there, about making sure that we remain abreast of developments so that we can act to upgrade our fleet to reduce carbon. So, yeah, I think that's a fair point. I think we got that. Lovely. Right. Yep. So, Councillor Janet Jones.
Just some of the issues that Councillor Mark Jones raised about the lighting, etc. Can we make any recommendations about those? Because I think we all feel very much the same about lighting.
Okay, so I think we picked up on cycle routes and active travel, but I think there was a more general point about effective lighting in our urban areas for people moving around.
In our urban areas, yeah. Okay. And I totally agree with the white lines as well, because we have people with poor visibility, suffering in macular degeneration. So white lines in any area would be really most acceptable for those with visual impairment.
Yep, thank you for that. I think that's very clear, and I think we've got that. So, Councillor Colette Thomas. Sorry.
Could we do more to promote the benefits of our sort of not for nature areas with our green spaces? Perhaps explaining to residents about the benefits and after we've done the assessments.
Yeah. Perhaps. So there's perhaps a bit about
promotion and the benefits of.
Right, okay. So sort of publicising some of the benefits and ensuring that the communications are happening when something has been done, I think is what you were saying there. So if something,
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Lucy Williams.
I wonder if this actually might be a possibility for a seminar. I noticed in when they're looking at the different work streams that there's a new climate adaptation plan due to be published from Welsh Government. Would it be worth, I think it might be more suitable if we had an update on that actual adaptation plan. I think that could be really helpful.
Everybody, I think that makes a lot of sense. All agreed with that? I think that would be a recommendation to make, even though the delivery might need to bring other people. But yeah, member seminar on that. That's very helpful. Thank you. And then I think Councillor Haller and Councillor Ashley for another bite of the cherry. Councillor Haller?
Yes, sure. Janet talks about the street lighting. Mark talks about street lighting. I've put a appeal in twice about some street lighting that merges one part of our community to another part of the community. It's been turned down twice. It's been turned down because it's been there since 2008. But surely if we're trying to get people back on their bicycles and get people to walk, we should give them the provision to be able to get from A to B feeling safe, especially during the winter. I'm not saying during the summer, but during the winter. Surely that there should be provision to put more lights back on during the winter months than there is in the summer because of the danger that people face. And there are people that do want to use active travel and they do want to walk, but they can't because it's so dark and dangerous on busy roads.
Okay, so I think there's a bit about making sure that we have adequate lighting, particularly in the winter, for
very much so.
Walking and cycling routes. Yep. I think that's a fair point. Not necessarily active travel routes, I think you were saying, Councillor.
No, but for walking and cycling routes, yes, sorry. Yeah. But then that does create active travel, doesn't it? So
it does. Yeah. Thank you for that. Councillor Ashley?
Yeah, I was the bit I had going about the peat bogs, blanket bogs, uprant and commons and all that. I'm just wondering, and the species that local nature partnership is on about. I wonder whether we could be specific in later reports about it because it wasn't there, and it does strike me it ought to be there. If you go to the Wildlife Trust, you can pick it up, but it's not in our report, and I think we ought to be specific about it.
Okay, I'm trying to think of framing that. I think,
it'd be a specific report, David. It's as simple as that, because it'd be useful for the population who does go up the mountains and does go up round about, just looking at what we got the glory of, if you like.
So you're suggesting that we have a specific report in relation to our nature and biodiversity that, if you like, is available, but is referenced within this overall plan. Is that a fair assessment?
David, that's beautiful.
And I think what I was picking up is that work is being done by the Local Nature Partnership, but again, that wasn't evident from this report. So I think we need to have something in relation to that. Okay, I think we'll work on that.
And species as well, because people are very concerned about it. When Wildlife Trust does a good bit of work, and maybe a bit of cross-fertilisation with them would be useful.
Yes, I think things are happening there. Great. Any more hands? Right. No, well, we come up with a good list of suggestions. If I may add one of my own or make a suggestion, the thing that struck me, and I did reference it a couple of times, was the BER 17, where I think we could be working a lot more with local groups to help promote some of the biodiversity, some of the things that have been mentioned. A couple of examples were given, but they were quite small and specific, whereas I think between us we would all know of various groups in our areas that would actually be quite keen to be engaged in some of this. So I think that would be my suggested recommendation, if you agree, that we actually look at working more closely with interested community groups to promote the nature, biodiversity and net zero work. Okay.
Could I support the Chair on that, please, and suggest they're specified?
Okay. Thank you. I think that's there. So Right, colleagues, we have a list of recommendations. Would you like me to ask Niall, Geraint to run through them quickly so you've got a bit of an overview? Yeah? Okay, Geraint?
Not sure how quickly I'm going to manage it. How many have we got, Geraint? About 16, 17. Okay. Do you want me to, or should we collate them and send them out to members?
What would you prefer, members? Would you like us to run through them now, or are you happy for us to collate those and circulate them? Circulate?
Collate and circulate.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay.
Go on, we trust you, Dave.
Well, I think, as you can see, as Geraint said, we've got 16 points down, so I think we have collected a lot of things. So all I can say is thank you very much, but I know I need to close the meeting more formally. I think we have a series of recommendations. We will circulate those to all members to sort of confirm that they are accurate, to be able to refer to the executive members and directors. And I should then advise that the next meeting of this Cross-Cutting Resources and Business Committee is on Wednesday, the 20th of November. Hopefully it's in your diaries already. And last but not least is to thank all members and officers for your contributions and your attendance today. Thank you. I declare the meeting closed.